and welcome to the Think MHK Podcast presented by the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. On this podcast, you will hear about a variety of local matters pertaining to the business community. You also hear from local business owners to hear their story and gain valuable business insights. Thanks for tuning in today. Welcome to the Think MHK Podcast. We're kicking off Season 3 with a very special guest. It's a little melancholy. Usually I'm very excited to see people, and while I am excited to have our guest with us today, it's for a reason that makes me a little sad. We have our Director of Visit Manhattan, which is our Convention Visitors Bureau, Karen Hibbard. Hey, Karen.
Hey, Jason. It is great to be here.
So I'm glad that you're here, but again, it's under a little bit different circumstances. We are here to discuss your pending retirement.
Yes.
Which is scheduled this month.
Yes.
And just talk a little bit about your career at the Chamber and how you ended up there and some of the accomplishments you've had over the years. But first, I just want to say, as someone who got to work with you for nearly 4 years, what a pleasure it is to come to the office every day. You're always very positive and always make us feel really good about our job and all the things that we're doing. And so I'll say it, I'm sure at other places, but I just want to make sure that I said how much I enjoyed my last 4 years working with you.
Oh, thank you very much, Jason. It has been pure joy to work for the Chamber. It really has. What a great way to be able to tell others about the community that you call home and to feel like you have a small part in making the community better.
So how did you end up at the Chamber? You don't have to give years, although that's out there somewhere, so I know people have seen it.
Many of our listeners will probably know this, but my very first job out of college when my husband and I came back to Manhattan in 1978 was with the Chamber of Commerce. Bill Edison hired me. Bill was helping to make the Chamber grow. Bill was the president CEO right after Led Fisher. And the Chamber at that time was 2 women and 3 men in very traditional roles. We lived in Wamego at the time, and I didn't want to drive for a short 15 minutes to work every day. So I was with the Chamber for about a year, and then I went to work at the Caw Valley Bank. And then time goes quickly, and in 1997, it was time for me to come back to work, and I came back. I read the ad in the paper that they were hiring a convention sales manager, and I remember telling my husband, I think this job is for me. And so I did a little bit of investigation, and Becky Blake was still here, came in and turned in my resume, and I remember Becky smiling and said, "You want to come back to work?" And I said, "Yes, I do. Would you consider me?" So we set up an interview, had an interview. She offered me the job, and I will never forget this. And for those of you that know Becky, and maybe you know me and some of the skills that I have, I remember when Becky offered me the job, she said, "Karen, you don't have computer skills." She said, "But I can teach you computer skills." But she said, "One thing that you have people skills, and I cannot teach you people skills." And so she hired me, and away I went in a blink, and now it's 26 years later. Here I am, ready to retire.
And do you think you have computer skills now, or is that something?
They're better, but I really have to ask a lot of people, how do you do that?
Yeah. So that's why I kind of chuckled inside there a little bit.
Yeah, I don't have computer skills.
So when you went back to take the position, did you envision that you would be there with us over 2 decades?
No, I did not. Actually, this is not a very well-known item. But actually, my husband and I were thinking that we were going to buy a newspaper, and we were going to leave the community and purchase a newspaper. And we had discussed it at length at home. Gordon had said, he said, "Babe, you probably need to brush up on some computer skills." So I went to work thinking that I would be at the Chamber, that we would be in Manhattan for just a couple more years, and then maybe we'd move away. And things changed with him and with my work and raising a family and helping change a community. And here we are. You were stuck with us.
Well, that's probably lucky on your part, because at that particular time, a newspaper investment might have been okay, but it's been, as somebody who came out of the journalism industry, that has definitely been a struggle.
Oh, absolutely. We see that as protection along the way, but we chuckle over that that was really kind of one of the motivating factors of going back to work.
So what made you get up and go to the office every day for 25 years?
Well, besides the fact that I got to tell bad jokes on a regular basis.
Now listen, I'm going to interrupt here for just a minute because, and I know our producer, Dave Lewis, is on the mic as well. But Dave, I have to tell you, I have not worked with anybody who has more bad jokes than Karen Hibbard.
I don't know many people that gets more bad jokes, and rarely are there any good ones either.
No, there are very few good jokes.
She's got a wide spread of jokes to tell.
I do. Yeah. So, but we're not here to talk about jokes. We're here to talk about what makes me get up and go to work every day. I really believe that it's because I love this community. It has been such joy to watch the community grow and change. And certainly there have been challenges along the way. There have been times that I have been more than discouraged. It's knowing that at the end of the day, maybe you have worked with a meeting planner. Maybe it's been a coworker. Maybe it has been a hotelier. Maybe it's been someone that has stepped into our office for the very first time, that maybe by having a conversation with them, you've made a difference. And so that's what has motivated me to come to work every day.
And what are some of the biggest projects over the years that stick out to you when you think about your career?
One was when we still didn't have a conference center in the mix, but we were confident that that was about to happen. Because my husband had been involved with Kansas Farm Bureau for many, many years, and we had, as a family, had gone to the annual meeting many, many times, not in Manhattan, Kansas. And I always thought it'd be great to get that meeting to meet in Manhattan. I remember having a conversation with him after I had gone home and said, I'm determined to bring KFB's annual meeting to Manhattan. And he said, that'll never happen. And sure enough, it did. And I will be forever grateful to Farm Bureau and those leaders that really said, yes, we can bring that in. That meeting looked a lot different then because they had to utilize the home office. They had to utilize the student union. They had to house their members in all different hotels. We helped with getting transportation to get people into those, to their meeting venues. But it took a lot of work on our part, on Visit Manhattan's part, in order to make that happen. We had meetings where we brought our hoteliers in and said, let's work to see how we can make that become a reality. And so for that organization to choose to meet in Manhattan and that to then believe that the conference center was going to become a reality really was a huge accomplishment for us to be able to make happen. Then I think the redevelopment with the lodging being as it is and the attraction put into place.
You're talking about downtown redevelopment.
Downtown, yes. The downtown redevelopment was really fun. I might share with you, as you can imagine, we brought in a lot of consultants to help us. We worked with JLL, and we didn't want them to come in to tell us what we wanted them. We wanted them to look at us objectively to see if a conference center really would be beneficial to our community. Tony Peterman was the gentleman that we worked with, and I will never forget, he came in the springtime. Well, what do we do in the spring? We burn the prairie, right? And Tony came in on an April morning, very, very early, and he was coming from California. And I had failed to tell him that there might be burning that he might experience as he came into Kansas. He came in, we had a 7:00 meeting that morning, and the very first thing he said when he came in, he didn't say good morning, he didn't say hello. He said, Karen, please tell me that burning that I saw was on purpose. And I went, oh, yes, we do have prairie burning. And so I've always remembered that because, again, with the redevelopment, with the Flint Hills Discovery Center coming online, that, again, just solidified to me the significance of bringing that attraction to life was that many times there are travelers, visitors that come into Manhattan in the springtime that do wonder, why are we burning the prairie, and for what is that reason? So
yeah, I didn't know till I moved here, so it was good. It was good information to get.
Absolutely.
So Farm Bureau is the largest event we have on a regular basis, correct? Yes. So do you rub Gordon's nose into it?
Maybe I might remind him of that from time to time.
And where was it before? Just did they move it around, or was
it was in Wichita? We brought it back from Wichita. So, and prior to it being in Wichita, it had been in Topeka. But for staff, and again, as we were talking earlier about newspaper, as you can imagine, equipment, if you had to load up Dave's office now, just the technology that went with the communications team, it was a lot. Some of those was back in the day when you were loading up big old typewriters that you were carrying. And so it just made sense.
So the staff was definitely on your side in terms of bringing it to Manhattan.
On our side.
Well, that's good. And it is a big event. And of course, the conference center has been just a huge addition to this community that when you started, you couldn't have even probably imagined having something like that to sell. And now you've got this facility.
Absolutely.
So you've obviously had some big wins in your career, but occasionally there are the disappointments as well. And I've come out of economic development where it has very similar, where you're competing for different kinds of projects and you win some and you lose some, and the losses seem to hurt more than maybe the wins feel good. But any disappointments that you've had that if in hindsight you would have done something different, or maybe things that you were just disappointed about? You
are exactly right. There are always going to be disappointments of when you have made, where your staff has bid on conferences, have put not just weeks, but literally months of time and effort into a proposal, and those things don't come to be. Those are disappointing, and those do kind of take the wind out of your sails. Certainly the one big one that had a big disappointment for our community was the loss of Country Stampede. That was very much a disappointment for that to go to a competing city. I do like to look at things in a positive light. We gave birth to that event, and those that came before me were the ones that created that event and helped make that grow. But that became really a June tradition. We knew that summer was here when Stampede was here. But like all things grow, change, evolve, and sometimes they have a slow death. And certainly Stampede, with the way that entertainment is, the cost of entertainment, I can guarantee you that the cost of entertainment that very first year was a heck of a lot less than it is now. And so there will be more events that will come as we see redevelopment continuing on with Aggieville and then the other businesses that have come up around the community. I'm positive that in the next 20, 25 years, Manhattan will yet have another signature event that puts Manhattan on the map in a big, big way.
Yeah, and I know that was the first year I was here, so obviously it was a disappointment for me as well. And I know your team took it really hard because you worked your tails off every year putting that on and setting, I think you told me one time you probably set up 175,000 chairs over the years.
At least.
Getting ready for that event. And it's just a scenario, as we talked about it, we had temporary facilities. We didn't have permanent facilities. And so they would spend $500,000 before they even signed their first act.
Absolutely.
And it just became a situation in today's market that became financially, it just wasn't viable anymore. And it's very disappointing, but we'll continue to work on replacements and whether we do need to build long-term infrastructure to support that or not. The one thing I will say is we just wrapped up a strategic planning process to prepare for your departure, because we want to make sure that you've all this knowledge in your head now. We have to get it all before you leave. But one of the things the consultant said was you have 7 festivals a year. They're Saturday football games, right, and you have 50, 60,000 people that come to town for those. And I think that's something to remember as well, as we've spent a lot of money on the infrastructure to accommodate those, and we get them. And so we shouldn't overlook that as being something really important as well.
Absolutely. And Kansas State has always played a big part in why people come to Manhattan. Whether you are a graduate or have come to enjoy athletic events, those folks that know Manhattan are also eager to see what else does Manhattan have to offer. And certainly the community in itself has a lot to keep people busy with.
It's a great community, and you all have done a great job in your time there. And so I think we'll have a lot of opportunities for big events going forward. Who are some of the people that have made the biggest impact on your career?
Well, certainly I had the great pleasure of working with Becky Blake, who was a great boss, but also we had the rarity of not only being coworkers, but we also became friends. Becky certainly was one that I truly cherished the ability to learn from and to learn how to promote this community from. So there are also countless people across the state of Kansas, some that have gone on, that have passed on, but some that still have had an impact in my life. I am very thankful for those folks that I've had the opportunity of working with regionally as well. I think in the last 26 years, we have seen an effort for Manhattan to be a very active part of the Flint Hills region. And there have been many things that have played into that. But some of the activities that happen throughout a 12-month time frame, throughout a year in the Flint Hills region, have been wonderful events to be a part of.
Well, Karen, we're going to take a break. So I think you can stick with us for a second segment.
I'm happy to.
All right. We'll be back in just a moment with the Think MHK podcast. The Think MHK podcast is brought to you by the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. Don't forget to subscribe and like the Think MHK podcast on your preferred podcast provider, and you will never risk missing an episode. If you enjoyed our show, please give us a 5-star rating and leave a review. To find out more about today's topic or other chamber activities, please go to manhattan.org. And now back to today's show. Okay, we're back at the Think MHK podcast, and we've had a couple of guests join us. Dave should have had the mic on. It was quite the
You told me to stop.
The reunion, although I think you guys see each other enough that it shouldn't have been that big a deal.
Well, we do, but I was surprised.
So in the interim, we've had Becky Blake, who is the former CVB director and, of course, state tourism director as well, join us. You heard Karen reference her earlier. And we have my predecessor, Lyle Butler, who was the chamber president for the majority of Karen's tenure as the director of Visit Manhattan. Welcome to the Think MHK podcast, guys.
Hey, it's great.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Of course, Lyle's been with us before. You were on last season, but Becky's, this is your first time.
It is.
Yeah, and of course on our producer, Dave Lewis, who I've asked to join the conversation as well, who's worked with Karen quite a bit as a board member and a community member. And so, Becky, I want to ask you first. So Karen talked about how she was hired and that you mentioned that she had good people skills, but no computer skills. And we can confirm that the computer skills issue maybe isn't. It's a little better. It's a little better. But what is it? You obviously knew Karen, but what was it that made you decide to hire her to start with as the convention sales? Because she didn't have any experience in that.
I was always taken by her personality, and I'm a bit of an introvert. Karen and I we're a good team because she is an extrovert, and I'm sure I had been advertising for the position, and a phone call came, and I hadn't seen or talked to Karen in a good long time, and she said, I think I'm ready to go back to work, and I'm kind of interested in this convention sales job. And I thought, yay! And that's exactly what she said. I don't have any experience, and I don't know anything about computers. And anyway, I knew she was the right person from the moment she called, and I'm glad she did call because she was the right person. I said, Karen, we can teach you all the rest. You've got the personality.
That's an interesting reminder, because I think sometimes we get so caught up in this idea that that when we hire these people, they have to have certain skill sets, and I think sometimes you just have to hire the best person. Yeah. So speaking of that, when you left, and of course Lyle was here at that point and became the director of tourism for the state, was it just automatic? Oh, this is Karen's job, or was there some discussion, or how did that go?
There was lots of discussion.
I kind of gave Lyle an ultimatum. I think after he picked himself up off the floor when I told him I was considering taking a job in Topeka, I said, but there's one condition. I want Karen to carry on. I'd done this for so long, and it was just me in the beginning, and it was my child, and I just wasn't willing to hand it over to anybody. So Lyle and I talked about it, and it just made perfect sense for Karen. She had the experience and the knowledge, and her computer skills were a little better.
The computer skills were better, but when I talked to Karen, one of the things that she said, I don't do this very well. And I'm going, budgets.
Yes. Oh, my goodness.
And she said, I said, Karen, we'll help you. I said, we'll do that. She said, oh, well, Becky had this all figured out and she had it all laid out and how it worked. She said, I don't know how to do that. Well, I said, we'll learn. All right. And so I think she struggled with that every year. I have to tell you, maybe she still does, but every year she hated budget time when Brenda or I would come around and say, well, Karen, and with the CVB, she had to go before the city commission because it's a transient guest tax, and Becky did too. So she had to do her work several months before the rest of the staff had to do our budget work. She didn't do well in that. She got very uptight, very nervous. And
so you're the reason I have gray hair.
Yeah.
Those budgets are the reason I have gray hair.
I will say this, and I got to where, because she's still stressed over it, and I would say, Karen, you're a lot better at this than you give yourself credit for. This, just quit worrying about it. It all works out. Right. And I said, at the end of the day, it's almost like we have to hit this right on the nose. I said, they're guardrails. They're not, you don't have to be specific. They're just ideas. So.
Tried to tell her that.
She didn't listen to me either.
No, she didn't listen to me either. And then the other thing is I could never get her to spend all the money. I said, the money is there to market, and that's what we need to do. And she was, you talk about somebody that was a good steward of tax money. Karen was outstanding with that. And so she did a great job, and she had a lot of respect from the city, all the city commissioners had respect for her and her budget and her presentation that she presented every single year.
Well, let's think about that, because this is an area that I don't think Karen gets enough credit for, that I got to witness. Because she didn't spend a lot of money, she had some money in reserves. And when COVID hit, they paid us half of what they were supposed to pay us in 2020. But there were a lot of contracts that were in place that we couldn't break, and a lot of projects that were ongoing that we couldn't stop. And so we lost a lot of money that year but unfortunately we had money in reserves and we're able to pay that back. But in the meantime, she's built the reserves back up because she is at her heart a cheapskate.
Not to where they were prior to COVID. And you're exactly right. My frugality did save us during COVID. And that was when you ask about disappointments or challenges in the community, none of us thought that we would ever live through days of just real direness of, what's this community going to look like when we get out of COVID?
And that hit the travel industry more than any other industry. And we met in February for our tourism, our CVB committee. And it was great to hear the hotel operators talk about things getting back to where they were pre-COVID. So it sounds like things are going better. Becky, from a statewide perspective, how do people feel about Karen? What do they think about her across Kansas?
Oh, she's very, very highly regarded. She served as president of the Travel Industry Association of Kansas 1 year, and was in leadership roles probably every year with that organization. Manhattan is a shining star in the state and has been for a long time, as other communities have struggled with organizational challenges, budget challenges, political challenges. Manhattan has just been pretty steady. And I always credited that to the relationship between the city and the chamber and frankly, the CVB staff and how they related. Because, many tourism organizations are separate or have become separate through the years. Some have gone back to the chambers. Others are part of governmental entities. But Karen she's just done a terrific job leading. There's been a lot of turnover. I feel like when I was in the position, we had folks that had served for a good long time just as it would be as people aged. I think Karen saw a lot more turnover in the positions across the state than maybe I had to deal with. But she was a steadfast leader and certainly was leading one of the best organizations within the state.
And Law, from your perspective, and you were chamber president for 20 plus years, what was the advantage of having somebody like Karen in the position basically nearly your whole tenure?
Yeah, well, between Becky first and then Karen, I mean, it's a dream come true when you can have somebody that is already in a position. And my philosophy in management was, if they're good people and they know what they're doing, I'm there to if they want advice and to help a little bit with some guardrails, but not many. And Karen just ran the program. Becky did too, but Karen followed and did the same thing. And I think just because what Becky said, even though I was with the chamber, but even when I would go to chamber statewide events, people would come up to me unsolicited and say, you're really lucky to have Karen Hibbard coming from the chamber perspective. And I think so it crossed over beyond just the Convention and Visitors Bureau. Karen could probably run for governor. She's so popular across the state. People know her. Nobody has sold Manhattan better than Karen Hibbard. Dave Lewis, we always used to call Mr. Manhattan. Well, there's Ms. or Mrs. Manhattan right there.
Don't pair her up with me.
Okay, I won't.
That would be an insult to her.
All right, well, scratch that. You can erase that.
We know what you mean. We know what you mean.
Yeah. But it's wonderful when you have employees like that. Yeah. And I don't go to bed at night and think, oh gosh, I wonder what the Convention and Visitors are going to do, or what are they going to say? Or Karen understood it, and she understood the big perspective, and she was a team player. And I think as some listeners may not know, is that we have 3 divisions in the chamber. We have the traditional chamber, we have the CVB, and we have economic development. And a lot of times those entities don't get along well, and they separate, as Becky says, or they come back together. And Karen was a team player, 100%. And it was a team player with the city, a team player with all the staff at the chamber.
I've been in the chamber business now nearly 30 years. And I've never worked with anybody as loyal and dedicated as Karen is. And so I would definitely reiterate that. Also, as a community, just how lucky Manhattan is to have had Becky and Karen as the only 2 directors ever of the CVB. I know there were some early on, but definitely for the last nearly 45 years. And so as a community, we've been really fortunate. And now somebody has to come in and try to be the next in that line. And so it'll be interesting to see how that process goes, and we're excited about it. We have Dave Lewis, our producer, the person here at the Ad Astracast studio that's in charge of everything. Dave, you've been in the community and worked with CVB for a long time. Talk about the community's perspective on Karen's work at the CVB over the last 20 years.
As far as the community's perspective, I think that you just look around and see how vibrant we are and how well established we have become. When you take into consideration some of the great things that we've had, we talk about the conference center, Flint Hills Discovery Center. There are so many great things that this community has added over the last several years, and all the different events. And, Becky, I know you were at the forefront of Country Stampede, and that was great to have that as long as we had it. Disappointing that, it found another home, but still, it just shows how we've had some great leadership with both Becky and Karen in that capacity. I don't know how many times I've had Karen on the radio, and I don't know that there has ever been a bigger ray of sunshine on the radio. And she has such an extreme positive approach to everything. She's a problem solver. She has a great vision. And, the relationships that she has, bad jokes or not, she gets things done. And, I was on the CVB steering committee for a number of years, and thanks to Karen, I'm back for just a 1-year stint. But it's, I always look forward to those opportunities because, I got to see Karen grow in that position. There's no greater advocate for the city of Manhattan than Karen Hibbard.
I agree with that 100%. So we're getting to the end of our episode, Karen, and you get last word since you're the guest of honor. The question that I had, and you can take this wherever you want, but how do you want to be remembered by the community?
Well, first of all, you all are very, very kind in your comments. I appreciate those. Those mean a lot to me. I have been extremely honored to serve in this capacity. I'm not dying. I've just got a lot of candles on my birthday cake, y'all. And it's time for me to step away. But what a pleasure it has been to serve not only the Chamber of Commerce, but to serve this community in this capacity. I love Manhattan. I love nothing more than being able to say, have you been to the Flint Hills Discovery Center? Have you played golf at Colbert Hills? Have you tried the new restaurant in town? Did you know you can zip line here in Manhattan? To be able to introduce to visitors, whether they come here often or whether they are here for the very first time. I love to tell the story of what there is to see and do in Manhattan and in the Flint Hills region. So it's been a pleasure. It's been a real honor to serve, and Manhattan will always be my home. So thank you, each and every one of you, for the place that you have played in my career. You will forever be dear, dear friends to me. Thank you.
Becky and Lyle, thank you so much for being with us today and helping us celebrate the career of Karen Hibbard, who is wrapping up a long stint with the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce as director of Visit Manhattan. And Karen, we're going to miss you, even though I know you'll come in and see us. And what we didn't talk about is one of the reasons you're retiring is new grandbaby in the Dallas area. And so we know you'll be taking a lot of trips to the DFW.
You know, you can fly MHK. Look at that.
You can. But we know you're going to enjoy being a grandma and getting to spend time with your family in Gordon. But make sure you come by and see us, and you can even tell a bad joke.
Oh, good.
So, and again, Dave, thanks for joining us and producing our podcast. And I'm looking forward to this season. We have a lot of interesting topics, including every one of the 15 under 40 this season. So, and that was an event we had in January where we honored 15 individuals in the region who have achieved a lot in a relatively short time. And so I'm excited to get for all of our listeners to get to meet those folks. So thanks for being with us today, and we'll look forward to season 3. Thanks for listening to this episode of Think MHK, a podcast produced by the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce. If you enjoyed the Think MHK podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe and share it out on your social media channels. Feel free to reach out to us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at the Manhattan Area Chamber of Commerce.